Okay, looks like it did that. All right. So as long as you don't move your mouse with any kind of luck, I'll be able to control your screen. Sometimes with Windows 7 and the GoToMeeting software doesn't let me control computers, so we're going to give this a go. So first of all, we have Adobe Bridge open, and looks like you've done some of our pre-work in that we've got our shortcuts already created in Adobe Bridge, so that part is good. So we'll go ahead and minimize Adobe Bridge for a moment, and we'll go ahead and open up Photoshop here, and we'll minimize Photoshop for a moment and open up Pixel Creator as well. Alright, so back over here to Photoshop. Alright, first things first, this is our layers palette right here. And what I would recommend doing is organizing things where they make a little bit more sense. So for example, when it comes specifically to album design, we don't really use our swatches palette. And then we have our styles palette and our info palette. And then we have our character and paragraph palettes. Our channels palette we're going to pull out here, and our paths palette. So what we have to do is just kind of determine what we actually use when it comes to album design, and just have those open. So our layers palette is useful, and then we also want to have our layer comps palette. So we'll drag that right into there. Our notes palette here, I don't use that, so we'll close that off. Now this info palette, I'm going to dock right here at the top. Now this mini bridge is not something that we use in album design. And this here is what? Our history palette. Again, not something that I typically will use. But our channels palette might be handy to have that. And the paragraph palette and the character palette, we use those quite a bit when we're adding text to our layouts. And then our styles palette, we'll use that. And then our paths palette, we might as well have that open. And then another thing we need to have open is our color palettes. And I like to drag it right to the bottom of my layers palette. And what else do we need here? Let's take a look, see if there's anything else we need. I think that's everything. Yep, I think that's everything for now at least. Now, a couple points to make. The basic Photoshop stuff. You see that our foreground and background color over here is red and white. If we hit the D key on our keyboard, that changes instantly to black and white. And then if we hit the X key, that switches our foreground and background color. And of course, why that's important is because when we're doing album layouts, typically we're going to be using lots of white and lots of black. And so it's just a quick way to set our foreground colors to black and white. D is for default, so that's default colors, black and white, and the X key will switch it back and forth. Okay, and then down here, the reason I like to have this little color thing down here is because when I hover over it, see how I get an eyedropper? And when I click on it, notice how my foreground color changes. And that's very useful when we're kind of mocking a layout out. When I'm doing a layout, I like to have all my image openings a different color. So I just click over here because it's just one click. When I hover over my color bar, I can click. Whereas if I were to double click on my foreground color, I'd have to double click on my foreground color. I then have to pick a color I want to use, and then I have to click OK just to set my foreground color. And that's a lot of clicking. So that's why I like to use this one, just one click, and I change my foreground color. So let's just kind of show you how we get started here. So like I was saying before, we want to have our layers palette visible. And then we click on our Create New Document tool like we did previously. And we get this large dialog box, and I hit OK. And that creates our basic page for us. So you see we have a nice white background with our guidelines. Now what this is showing you, we have one guideline right down dead center, showing us the dead center of our layout. And then we have guidelines showing you dead center of the left of the page and dead center of the right of the page. So then my next process would be to go over to Adobe Bridge. Now, how you design is really entirely, at the end of the day, it's entirely up to you. What I think might be helpful for you is to take your images and kind of do a little pre-design. And so by that I mean, let's just create, let's come down here, let's go to, let's file, let's see here, there's a file, new folder, and let's just call it, I think we got a spread 01. Okay, so this would be the first spread of our layout. And let's just say hypothetically, I wanted these three images to be for my first layout. So I just drag them and drop them into my spread 1 folder. And then I would do that, so then I would just come in here and create another new folder, and we'll call it spread 02. And then we could determine what images we wanted to use for the second spread, and so forth. And
okay, can you highlight multiple images from different areas?
Yeah. So
you have to click them one at a time to drop them into that second spread?
No, that's a great question, because it's something you're going to do all the time. So if I click on this image, and if I hold down my Control key, and I can click on this one and this one. Now, another thing that's very useful if you don't know, and well, let me put it this way. When it comes to album design, there is really no shortcut. Just like with photography, there is no shortcut when it comes to taking great-looking images. And the same is true with album design. And there's a lot of little things that are built into Photoshop and Bridge and Pixel Creator that really make the design process easy. But one thing that I really like in Bridge here, notice I have 3 images selected. If I simply hit my space bar, notice I get a nice big view of that image. And as I use my arrow keys, I can cycle through those 3 images that I have selected. Isn't that cool? And then I can hit my escape key, and that will escape out. And notice I still have the same 3 images selected. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. A lot of people don't even know that they just hit the space bar and they get a nice big view of their images. So if something looks, you can't really see these images really good, but just hit the space bar and you get a full screen view. So anyhow, that's how you select more than one image. You just click on the first, hold your Control key down, and click on the other images. Now, you don't have to do it that way in that using that spread method. The one advantage by kind of doing a little bit of pre-design in that manner is if you go into our templates and go into the Pixel Creator Pro category, this is the category that has the majority of the album templates. And when we open that up, you'll notice that all of the templates are sorted by number of image openings. So we clicked over here on we have a shortcut to our template folder. And then we clicked on our Pixel Creator Pro folder. So if you go through that process of kind of doing that initial pre-design, these are the images that I'm going to use on this page, and these are the images I'm going to use on that page. Well, then what we're able to do, of course, is we know that spread 1 folder, we had 3 images. So we could come into our 3 opening templates, and we know as we look at those, all of those have 3 image openings. Okay, so for example, let's say I like this layout right here. What I would do is come back over to Photoshop for a moment. Remember, we have our blank 10 by 20 page, so that when we click on this template here in Bridge, so this is our preview file, which is a JPEG file, and then this is the actual template file, and it ends with a JSX extension. So if I want to use this template, I simply double-click on the template, the JSX file, double-click on it, and what it will do is it should create the layout. See, it says, do I want to insert photos? I'll say no. And if I go back over here to Photoshop, it's created that layered document for us. You can see that there. So I'm going to set my background color to black. Now, in Photoshop, we could manually click on the background layer. We can notice my foreground color is blue. We could manually set our foreground color to black by hitting the D key. And then to fill my background layer, I could come up here to Edit, come down to Fill, and it says Fill with our foreground color, and we get a black background. Okay, so that's the manual way. Now, the reason that we have Pixel Creator is to simplify our life. The only key thing is in time, just like all those menus on your camera, in time, each menu in your camera has a function, and in time, you know where those functions are in those menus. And it'll come that way in Pixel Creator. But notice that my current layer is Image Box 3. My foreground color is this light blue, and I want to change my background color to black. So instead of doing all those steps we just did in Photoshop, in Pixel Creator, we want to do something to our layout. So we'll click on our layout tools and hit black background. And see, it does all that for us. So much less steps than doing it all ourselves. So we have our layout here. Now what we want to do is come back into Bridge, and let's just look at our images. And this is just a matter of, well, what we want to do. Now if we come into our images here, we got to find what happened to our folders here. Oh, it's a different. Oh, okay. Where was that one that we created?
We have it open in Bridge.
And how would I get back to that?
I think you go in Camera.
Okay.
And go to Computer.
Okay.
And then go to In Drive. This is John Webb.
Got it.
And then go to Camera's Web Folder.
Okay.
And then you will see where it says Marina and Chris. It's up under your little box.
Okay. Yep, I got it. And then
click out from Files.
and then JPEG files.
And then now you're back in.
All right. So what I'll do is I'm going to back up one and just create a temporary shortcut so we can access those images with just one click, because we're going to be switching between our templates and our images all the time. And then what?
That was going to be another question. Is there a way to get your images in a vertical, so that you can see the images down the side. You can select to pull it into the different templates. You don't have to keep switching back and forth and back and forth.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And really, once you get used to it, you'll probably prefer that, because we want to maximize our screen real estate when we're in Photoshop. And you'll get used to the switching back and forth.
Yeah, you get that Bridge, Photoshop, and Pixel Creator open all at the same time.
Right. Now we don't technically have to use Bridge, but I mean it is the most productive way to work. I mean, if you in other words, if you didn't have Bridge open at all, and we wanted to insert an image, it would just open a standard dialog box and allow us to insert an image like we normally would. But using Bridge does definitely simplify the process. So we have a template open, and if we go into our spread 01, we have our 3 images here. And basically, if we look at the template, this particular template actually works out pretty well for us because we have 3 horizontal image openings. And we have 3 horizontal images. Now that won't always be the case, obviously. So notice here in Photoshop, when we're in our Move tool, we have this Auto Select option. And what that allows me to do is if I click on any one of these layers, if you notice over in the Layers palette, it'll jump right to that layer just by clicking on it.
Well, actually, your little dialog box for the come to meeting is right on top of it.
Okay, so here's what we need to do. If you look at the Go to Meeting toolbar there, there's a little arrow, little orange arrow pointing to the right.
Yes.
If you click on that little arrow, I can't see that little arrow, so if you click on it, it'll minimize that.
Okay.
All right, so now when I click on any one of these layers, notice in the Layers palette, it just jumps right to that layer.
Right.
And that's because I have Auto Select selected. Now, because I have Auto Select selected, if I click on this image opening on the left, it jumps to image box 1. If I hold down my Shift key and click on this lower right one, watch what happens in the Layers palette. Notice that those two are highlighted in blue. And that's significant because what we're telling Pixel Creator is, hey, I want to work on these two layers. And what do I want to do to these two layers? Well, I want to insert a photo into those two layers. And so then it would allow me to insert an image into those two layers that I have selected. So if we'll start here on the left one here, and I want to insert an image. So I've selected my layer. I come into Bridge, and then I have to determine which of these three images I want to be my main focal image. And let's say I like this one right here. So when I hit Insert Photo here in Pixel Creator, it's going to take that image and it's going to calculate the size of that image and the size of that opening and resize my image accordingly. And you notice now it's been positioned. Now if you look closely, the transformation handles here. Notice that the image is extended over the right-hand side of the image opening. And you notice at the top, a little bit of the image is being cropped at the top and cropped at the bottom. And this is most typically the case where there's some cropping involved because the image opening was a little bit different aspect ratio than the image itself. Now the reason that this image extends beyond the right-hand side is a different reason. So let me show you that. I'm going to go ahead and place the image by hitting Enter. There's a function here in Pixel Creator, and usually you'll want it one of the other ways. Either this way, the way it is by default, or what I'm going to show you next. But if I click on this little button here, that's our Pixel Creator Pro preferences. And one of the preferences is this option right here, which is resize factor. So let me set that to 100. And hit apply, and then I'll show you what the difference is. So we have this image layer selected, the one here on the left. We still have our image selected in Bridge. So when I hit Insert Photo again, what it's going to do is just going to replace that image again.
Okay.
But you'll see it'll do it differently this time. And notice the transformation handles. Notice now here on the right side, it's right on the edge of the image opening. So it's resized the image that we selected to the exact width of the image opening. And you may like it that way. For me, I like to have it slightly oversized. So I choose 110% resize factor. As long as we drag the transformation handles from the corner, as we drag, it'll scale proportionally. But you notice as we make the image smaller, the actual image opening gets smaller too. And that's because the image opening is still the same size it was, but there's no image over here to show. If I move the image, you see how the image opening gets bigger over on the right, and now it's smaller on the left. And that's because there's nothing there to show. Well, you can't stretch the image to fit, but you know there is one thing I wanted to toy with, because like let's say I like for this particular image, let's say I really like how close this building is over here on the right hand side. There is a fun thing in Photoshop called content-aware scaling, and it would be kind of interesting just to see how it works with this image. Some images it works pretty well, some images not so well. But if I unlink this layer mask, and then we come up here to the Edit menu and choose Transform, let's see here. Where is that? Here, content-aware scale. That's what I'm looking for. And watch what happens. So I'm gonna stretch this image so it fits better. But see how like the image really didn't get too bad distorted. The building is still more or less intact, and we kept the building nice and tight to the edge here, and we just kind of stretched out that road. Isn't that kind of cool how you can and you know the building pretty much stays intact. So that's kind of a fun thing to do sometimes when you just want to fill in a little bit of an area there. We'll hit enter, and so yeah, it's kind of a fun little effect there. But at any rate, that's more of a Photoshop thing than a Pixel Creator thing. So now we have our image in place. If I want to change the position of my image once it's already been placed, these tools here, the way we've set this Pixel Creator up is you have 8 basic functions here. Okay, it says guides, and then we have B, R, and C. And what this means is this is our main guideline tool, and then B is for border, R is for reset, and C is for clear. So watch what happens when we hit C for clear. Okay, it just clears out the guidelines. Okay, and if I hit R for reset, it just resets the guidelines that we had previously. If I choose B for border, because I have an image layer selected, and I hit B for border, I get a series of guidelines around the border of that image. If I were to have a selection made, and I hit C for clear out all the guides, and then I hit B for border, notice I get a series of guidelines around the border of a selection. So that is just sometimes helpful when we're doing various different design tasks to way to quickly add guidelines. So basically we have one function here, guides. We have auto align layers, we have an insert photo tool, a quick divide tool, a color bar stroke outline tool, merge apertures, add aperture, and break apart. If we focus on just these core functions to start with, once we've mastered these, then we can look at all the other fun stuff in here. But this is really where it all happens, is right here in just these few tools. So when we want to populate more than one image, we can click on our first image opening, like we switch back to our move tool. So we click on one image opening, hold the shift key down and click on the other, and notice that we have 2 layers selected here in Photoshop. If we look at these layers, and all of our templates work the same way. When a template goes to be populated, it goes from left to right and top to bottom. So if you look at this image on the left, notice it says image box 1. And then this image here on the top is image box 2, and the image here is image box 3. So the point there is, if we have image box 2 and 3 selected here, when we come into bridge, image box 2 is going to be populated before image box 3, because Pixel Creator populates in order. So if I knew that I wanted this image to be in image box 2, what I would do is I would just slide it over and make sure that's the first image. And so when I select those 2, it's going to go 1, 2. So back over to Photoshop, it's going to go image box 2 and 3. So let's go ahead and hit Insert Photo and see how this does. So it calculates the size of that first image layer, and then it opens up our image, calculates its size, and then resizes it to fit. And notice we have that exact fit. So again, this image fits exactly to the width of our image opening. And we can either use our mouse to move the image, or we can use our arrow keys, which in this case it might be better just to use our arrow keys. And then once we have the position the way we want it, we hit Enter. And it'll automatically move on to the next image opening and automatically grab the next image in bridge that we selected. And there's our next image. Now, that's kind of the basics of inserting images. Now, when I'm working, typically, I don't get too wrapped up in what image goes where. We know that this is the layout that we want to populate. We know that these are the 3 images we want to use, and all I want to initially do is get them into the layout. So, for example, let's say that I wanted this image on the lower right to actually be placed with this image on the left and vice versa. I want the one on the left to be in the lower right. I've selected both image layers, and I did that by just clicking on one image layer, holding down the Shift key and clicking on the other one. Always good to get in the habit of doing your layer selections here inside your layout. Over here in the layers palette, we can't really see what the heck is what because the thumbnail is just too darn tiny. Now, Photoshop does give us the ability, and I like to turn it on under panel options, to make our thumbnails bigger. So we choose this bigger thumbnail option here. So we can kind of see a little bit better in these thumbnail previews, but I still like to do your layer selections here rather than try and locate the proper layer over here. But you'll notice when we use Pixel Creator to insert images, as part of the file name, or the layer name, we have the file name. So, and the reason we do that is because in the background, when Pixel Creator inserts an image, it's recording the directory of where these images came from. So when I use this tool here, Layout Tools, so again, we're going to modify something with the layout, so that's why we've put all the layout tools right here in the Layout Tools menu. We have black, right, so we'll choose the Swap Selected Images, and Pixel Creator will find that directory and find these images within that directory, and it is going back to the original high-res files and making that swap for us.
Okay, so it doesn't swap them within the page. It goes back to Photoshop and gets the high-res page.
Right. Now notice that this one it says it does not exist. So we'll go ahead and click yes. And the first time we'll just have to tell it, hey, this is where it's at. So we'll go back to, and usually we only have to do this once per layout. Once we've done this for one layout, it should basically work for all the layouts. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come into Computer, and we'll go to our N drive, and then we'll come down here to Tamara's work folders. And you know what? We don't even have to specify a certain directory. We could just get it close. So if I hit OK, it might take a little bit initially to find those files, but it'll sort through any subdirectories that we have there till it locates these two. And if I remember correctly, we didn't have that many folders to go through. So let's see here. I don't know if it's not letting me click on OK. Maybe you can click on OK. Yeah, go ahead and you click on OK. Maybe it's okay. Maybe it's still thinking. We'll just give it a second here. So what Pixel Creator should be doing is kind of cycling through all the directories within that folder till it locates that. We probably should have picked the directory because what it's going to have to do is going to have to look at the file name of every image in every folder till it gets to that one. And that was the last folder in this directory. So okay, see, it found it finally, and it'll make the swap. And what we'll test it out here is once it's made these swaps. So notice how it swapped it out, and we hit return, it goes on and moves on to the next image. What we'll do here is we'll try the swap again, and this time we'll probably see it just it'll kick right in. We don't have to tell it where to find these images, because once we've told it once, it's supposed to be smart enough to remember where the images came from. So let's select the top one and the left one, and we'll choose swap again. We'll see what it does here. Now the only thing that may be a little bit different on this, because you know I don't think I've ever tested it, because we're working on a network drive, right? See, I wonder if it'll
My husband and I's computer are linked together.
Okay.
Oh, he says I'm pulling from an external drive.
I don't know that that'll make any difference necessarily, but it should happen a lot quicker than this. I mean, usually it just happens, boom, there it goes. I wonder, yeah, I don't know if it's just a matter of the network traffic or what. I mean, it could be, I guess. But notice that this time we didn't have to tell it to look for a particular directory. It found it on its own.
Right. So it's one time per album design.
Yeah. Because what's going to happen is the next time, if we stop this album design and moved on to another one, and we go to insert images and try that swap feature, it's going to think that we're still in this directory when really we're in a completely different directory. So once we've told it, hey, this is our working directory now, then going forward you'll be able to do all the swapping you want. No big issue. So that is kind of the basics of inserting your images. We know how to insert image one at a time. We know how to insert more than one image at a time. And then once we have our images in place, we know how to swap an image from one opening to another.
Okay, and I have just a couple questions, which is how up at the top, that's where you got to the template.
The templates themselves, we're going to access an Adobe Bridge. And we have that, we've already created that shortcut.
Okay.
So we can click on templates. Now in here, like the left side templates, see what's kind of cool about these is all these templates will only fill in the left hand side of a document. And then if we go to right side templates, then all these templates will only fill in the right hand side of a document. So this way we can kind of mix and match different halves to make a whole. When we come into our back to our template folder here, we have these complete albums. Now what we did here and going forward, we've got a lot of comments from our users that when you look at our templates in the Pixel Creator Pro category, like if we go to 5 opening templates, for example, if you look at these templates, these are all nice templates individually. But you'll notice that this template style is very different than this template style. So these two templates probably wouldn't go well together in an album. But
So those three that you were just showing me, those are the top three sort of designs?
not really the top 3 designs, but these every spread, if you notice, every spread is different, and yet every one is similar, right? Because they all have they all have a similar style. So that's the advantage of using templates from the complete album series, is they're all designed to have a similar style, and all the layouts within here were specifically designed to go into one album. Whereas
Okay, so if you pick, let's just say, designer album 2,
mm-hmm.
and you use that to design your album,
Mm-hmm.
you would just save it as whoever. So
Right.
You don't override it, right?
Correct. Exactly.
Okay, and so it just lets you flow page by page, and then if you wanted to add a page, you could pick another page that
Right.
you could add it at the end.
Right. So, like, for example, let's go ahead and we'll click on our Create New Document here. And we've got to go back over to Photoshop for that. we just create a new blank page. So we create a new blank 10 by 20. So if I want to use this page, for example, I'm just going to double click on the template file and then go back over to Photoshop, and you can see it building the template for me. And if I want to insert images, I'll say no. And then I could go ahead and save this as like spread 1. And then I would click on the Create New Document tool again, and I click OK. And then back over to Bridge. And let's say I want to use this template for my next spread, so I just double click on it. And it'll go ahead and generate that. I'll say no. And then I go ahead and save this as spread number 2. Now, it gets a bit more complicated, but we could even take, like, let's say I like this grouping of images. I could actually take this grouping of images and copy it to a different document altogether. So, for example, I'm just going to come in here and see, we'll pull that down. So if I want these 4 openings, I just selected them here in my layers palette, and then I just drag and drop from one document to another right from the layers palette here, and then go back to this document. And now you can see that those 4 layers that I dragged in here, let's go ahead and close that one out, are now part of this layout. So I could just select those 4 layers, and I could just kind of reposition them. And then maybe I don't want to use this one at all, so I could just hit delete. And so I could save this new configuration. I could save it blank like it is now, so I could reuse it for a future album layout, or I can make this, spread number 3, whatever the case might be. And these image openings, because everything's a separate layer, we could just use free transform in Photoshop, which is Control-T, and we can make those image openings whatever we want. In fact, we could even rotate an image opening. So let's make this one bigger and make it a little bit wider. And let's say we want to do something like that. And if we want to change the layer order, I want this little green box to be on top, and we want a layout like this. So when I go to populate this image opening, it's the same basic process. I come back over here to Bridge. There's our images. So I click on our shortcut to our images, and then when I select my image and I hit Insert Photo, come back over here to Photoshop, it'll go ahead and insert my image, even into the rotated image opening. And then it's going to pause, and of course I can position my image. If I come to the outside of the image, I can rotate it. And if I drag from the corner, then I'll be able to resize it to make it fit this image opening exactly the way I want it. And then when I'm happy with it, I just hit return.
As a beginner,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in these 3 sort of redesigns.
Right. The completed, yep.
To totally get to that, I would go to a new document.
Right, so you're going to create a new document, what size album you're going to be doing. And then what we'll do, if you like that particular category, rather than having just a basic shortcut to templates, we'll just drag over a new shortcut that will take us specifically. Right. So let's undo the move. So we just right-click on Complete Albums and choose Add to Favorites. And then we can kind of sort these. So now, so I'm in my image folder here, and then I can jump right to my Complete Album folder and then select from one of those 3 pre-designed album layouts.
Okay. And so then if I wanted to, then I could just start inserting pictures.
Right. Now, there is a drawback to the Complete Album series. And the drawback is when we are looking at these layouts, like let's say for this one, I like this layout. This particular layout has 5 image openings, but if you remember, Right, and so what you'll find is that when you're using an album, um, what you'll probably find when you're using an album like this, rather than picking from the same number of images that you're working with from a spread, we're going to find ourselves adding to or subtracting from more frequently. So let's say, for example, I like this layout, but for the page that I'm working on, I need 6 images. Well, this layout only has 4. So I'm going to have to add 2 more image openings to this layout. And that's, that's pretty common. So what we'll do here is we'll just create a new document again. And there's plenty of options that we'll go back into Photoshop here. And we'll just click OK to create our blank page. Back over to Bridge to grab our template. And then back over to Photoshop. All right. So first things first, we've in my scenario, I've already pre-sorted my images for the 6 images I'm going to use for this layout, and so I have a good idea of what I have for verticals and what I have for horizontals. So let's say, for example, for the images that I'm working with, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this large image opening, and I'm just going to make it only come into half my page here. So that image is going to stop there. And then I'm going to take these 2 images, and I'm going to move them up, and then I'm just going to use Photoshop to duplicate the 2. And there's a really fun little shortcut, which is to hold down my Alt key and click and drag. And see how it created 2 exact duplicates. And then I'm just going to use my arrow keys and eyeball this spacing. So the spacing between these 2 images vertically, I want about the same spacing horizontally. And then finally, I'm going to take these 2 images that I made duplicates of, and I'm just going to drag them down. And so now this is my new layout. Now I have the 6 image openings that I needed. Now I can go ahead and populate it. So it's really simple, to copy an existing layer. Now, basic functionality, templates are great, but there's going to be times where you're going to want to do something and you're not going to find a template for what you want to do. And designing your own ideas is just as easy as working with a template when you're using Pixel Creator. And here's a couple of key things to keep in mind. Any selection we make using the Photoshop selection tools can become an image opening. So for example, if I just make a selection, that's telling Photoshop this is how big I want my image opening to be. So when I come into Bridge and I select an image, so we'll use this image right here. When I hit Insert Photo, because I had a selection made, Pixel Creator Pro goes into a different mode. It calculates the size of my selection and drops my image right inside that selection, and it creates a new image layer for me automatically. So that is going to be a really useful tool for you. So likewise, if I make a round selection, and I hit Insert Photo, then it's going to take that same image, drop it into place for me, but now you can see I have an oval selection. So any selection I make can become an image opening. So in Photoshop, we also have an option here to do feathering. So if I do a 200 pixel feather, and I make that same oval selection, and I hit Insert Photo, opens up, does the resizing, drops it into place for me, and now you can see I have a nice soft edged image opening because I used the feather option, which I hadn't used previously. And I go ahead and hit Enter. Now, every time we use Insert Photo, Quick Divide, or Add Aperture, any one of those 3, we always get a red stroke. And so we can come into a red stroke, black strokes, white strokes, drop shadows. Those are, of course, all layer styles here in Photoshop. So if we come into Layer Styles menu in Pixel Creator, we could choose Hide Layer Style, and that makes the red stroke go away. Basically, it's the same equivalent as clicking on the little eyeball next to the word Effects here. We toggle that on and off. That's how we get rid of that red stroke.
The red or black. Or
Yeah.
whatever you decide on.
Right.
So if I'm in an album and I need to add, I can draw the oval, draw the rectangle, draw the square,
Correct.
and add it.
Correct.
And I just open it as a new document. Then I pick if I want album 2. And then I just drag and drop over to the right the different templates that I want.
Correct.
For the JPEG version. For how many pages I'm going to be doing for that album.
Right.
Okay, and then at the very end, then I just save the album as whatever name I want, and it does not affect my template.
Correct. That's correct. So what we'll do here, let's create a blank document because I do want to show you this. Let's go back over here to Photoshop and we'll hit. All right, so we have our blank document. I'm going to come into Bridge and I'm going to just generate a template. And we'll generate this one again. It's going to create those layers for me. I'm going to hit no, and then what we'll do is we're going to save this. So let's pretend that I have all my images in place. I'm going to hit File, Save As, and then I'm going to save it to my desktop for now. And I'm actually going to create a new folder, and I'm going to just call it Finished Album. And so in my Finished Album folder, I'm going to save this as this is going to be my spread, my first spread. So I'll call it Spread 01, okay? Now, and you're going to do that for all the pages in your book. So when you're all done, you might have 10 pages or 20 pages. Let's go ahead and we'll save this one too, being how we already got it created. So let's hit Save As, and we'll call it Spread 2. And hit Save. And so we're going to do that for every layout that we're going to do. Now, when we're all done here, we've finished all of our pages, we need to send these files, we need to upload these files to PictoBooks, right? So they can do the printing and the binding. Well, we have a function in Pixel Creator, which is under our Utilities menu, right here, which is called Prep for Print Output. So when I click on this button, we'll get a dialog box. And what it's telling me is where my source directory of my album layouts. Where is that source directory? So when I click on that button, I can tell it it's in my finished album. Okay? The target directory by default is going to be in your finished album folder, and most of the time that's where you're going to want to save the flattened version. You have two options. When we're doing a photographic lay flat book like a PictoBook, you're going to choose Copy Image because your entire spread is going to be, when you open it up, it's just going to be one page. If you're doing like a press printed book or something like with White House or through a photographic lab, now they're going to have you split the layout in two. Or like if you're doing a slip-in album, you'd have to split the layout into two halves. But for a PictoBook, you're just going to use the Copy Image function. And then typically you're going to export as a JPEG, and we can change the quality down to 10 if we want. Now we do have another option, which is to create thumbnails. So if you wanted to create a low-resolution preview file that you could upload to the website for client review or something like that, you have that option. If you don't want to use thumbnails, just don't choose that function. Just uncheck it. And all we're wanting to do is take our layered Photoshop files, flatten them, export it as a JPEG. So let's go ahead and hit Prep and see what it does here. So it opens up that first file, flattens it, saves it, takes our second file, flattens it, and saves it. That's all it does. Now if we go into Bridge here and take a look at that folder, we can see what we got. So let's go to our desktop. Let's go to our finished album folder. So we still have our original PSD files. Those remain untouched. So once our client says, you know what, we want to make some changes, you can go back to your PSD files and make those changes. But the files that we're going to upload to PictoBooks are right here. And that's under our prints folder. And so you can see these are just two high-res JPEG versions of the layout that we did. But they're flattened, ready to upload, through my Picto on the PictoBooks website. So that is kind of the nuts and bolts of it. There's a lot of buttons and doodads and gadgets. But the key thing is now, do you by chance have an album that you had PictoBooks designed for you that's on a hard drive somewhere?
We've got 3 on the way, but we've not picked one yet.
Okay. All right. So, but basically what's going to happen is when you get your images, your book design back from PictoBooks, they're going to send you a layered.
Well, they sent us the disc so we could see it, and we sent it to our client, and one client made changes, one client didn't make any changes, and so now they've gone back to
Okay.
design.
So what I was wondering is those files that they sent to you on disk, do you have those on a hard drive somewhere?
Yeah, because they did the album design, and
Well, my main point that I was going to show you is, if you're going to have them, when they do a design for you, they're going to give you all the layered Photoshop files. And so if your client says, you know what, I want this image in the upper right changed, then it's just a matter of selecting that layer, and then of course going to Bridge, selecting a new image, and when you hit Insert Photo, it'll just swap that image out.
right.
So
Well, that's what they did. One client, they picked, it was 7 pictures that they wanted.
modified.
Swapped out
Yeah.
7 others, and we did that.
Did you do it with Pixel Creator or just do it manually?
With Pixel Creator.
Oh, you did. Okay, so you did get that figured out. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's
With a lot of help from a lot of help from y'all.
yeah. So at any rate, that's that's kind of the basics. Now, the other point to make, I guess, and it, just like with photography, you could go on and on probably for days, because there are a lot of options when it comes to working in Photoshop. But there is a couple of points that I think is important. We know that any selection. See, when I make a selection, remember before when I made a selection, I clicked Insert Photo, and it just dropped my image in, and it resized it to a size. Well, that's cool. I mean, that's cool that you can do that. But if you want to kind of just lay out the layout without actually inserting an image at first, you could just choose Add Aperture. And all it does is create a new layer filled with whatever our foreground color is. And that's why I have this little color bar. So when I click down here, I choose a different foreground color. So now I can make a different selection. And when I choose Add Aperture, see, now it just creates a new layer. So if I want to just kind of mock out a layout, an idea, move some boxes around, that's a good way to do it without actually working with images at first.
Right, and it's all on the back
Right. Right. The other thing that is really very advantageous is we don't have to only use selections. Any shape layer can become an image opening. So Photoshop has these great vector drawing tools. So like, for example, if I use my rounded rectangle tool, I'll type in 1 inch for the rounded corners. And when I make a selection, you can see that I have a nice box with nice rounded corners. And so when I come in here to bridge, I'll grab an image. And when I hit insert photo again, now the first thing it says, this isn't an image layer. When we know that, but we're going to convert it automatically. And so it'll convert it to an image layer, which it's already done, and then drop our image into it. So now we have an image opening with a nice rounded corners. So it really adds a lot of options when it comes to creativity, because you have these basic shape tools here, but we also have this other thing called their custom shape tool. And if you go on the internet, there's all kinds of different custom shapes you can download. But you can.
Okay, now what if you get something and you just absolutely hate it, and you just want to undo it?
Well, the easy way to do it is just to delete. Like if I didn't like this particular layer, I could delete that layer. Or you can just let's cancel that. But the easy way is just to delete whatever you don't like, or if you have your history palette open, you can go back in history and back up whatever steps that you want to back up. But any shape. So now I'm in my custom shape tool, and then these are all the preset shapes that come with Photoshop. If we click on this little arrow, there's all kinds of different shapes that you could add to it. So like if I click on, let's click on animals here. So for example, if I would draw this little bunny rabbit, and then I hit insert photo, probably not a perfect example, but the point is that any shape that is available in Photoshop can become an image layer. And so that adds a lot more options to the different types of image openings that you can create. That rounded rectangle is one in particular that I like to use a lot. The other thing to point out is this quick divide tool. When it comes to album design, is probably one of the most useful tools, because it allows me to make a selection. So I'm going to make a vertical selection here. And what I want to do is I want to take, and in this selection, I want 3 image openings. So when I click on Quick Divide, I'm just going to divide vertically by 3. And the spacing between my layers I want to be 1/4 of an inch. I'm not going to divide horizontally. And so I just click on Create Image Layers, and I hit Divide, and I get 3 perfect image layers with 1/4 inch spacing. So if I come over here, I'm going to make like more or less like a square type selection. Not perfectly square, but more or less square, and I hit Quick Divide. And this time I'm going to divide vertically and horizontally by 3 with 1/4 inch spacing. And now when I hit Divide, now I get 9 equal-sized image openings that I could then populate with images. So that quick divide is a very, very useful thing. You'll probably find yourself using that a lot. Last thing I want to point out is when we're making, I'm just going to make a selection here. Let's go back here and we'll make a selection and kind of go across the entire canvas here. And I'm going to choose this Add Aperture. One thing that you'll probably find yourself wanting to do pretty regularly is when we insert an image. So let's go ahead and insert an image. Now this is going to be we'll do a horizontal. This will be fine. A good example. So the image, of course, is going to go all the way across the spread. But what I want to do is I want this image on the right-hand side to just kind of fade to black. And so you'll find yourself probably doing this quite a bit. And so I want this image to stop right about here. And I want it just to kind of fade off. And so, of course, we would do that using our gradient tool here in Photoshop. And up here, there's all your gradient options. And this is your standard black to white gradient. And notice if you notice in the preview here, it starts with black and it goes to white. So when I click on my layer mask over here, and because I clicked on my layer mask, when I draw my gradient, I'm going to draw it from left to right. Notice how it filled in my layer mask. Now I'm going to undo that because I want to make this point. Right now, part of the image is being cropped at the top and bottom. If I drag from left to right on my layer mask, watch what happens. Notice that now the image fills the entire page from top to bottom. That part that was being cropped away is now visible. So I'm going to back up one more time. So I want this image to have black at the top and bottom. So what I need to do is I need to tell Photoshop I want to apply a gradient, but I only want to apply it to this area. So I just control click on my layer mask first, and see now I get a selection. And so when I draw my gradient, again from left to right, it's only going to fill that gradient, and you can see it here in the preview. That gradient, it only fills in the area that I had selected. Now, I actually need to pull it from right to left to get it to fade off in the way I wanted it to. And depending on how far, I could pull it way over here. It could, but see how nice of an effect that has, because it now has a nice little soft gradient. So anyhow, those are just a couple of little artistic things that aren't too complicated. But obviously the more you know about Photoshop, the better. And we do have a great training series on our website that's all about Photoshop. So if you click on our video tutorials and it says digital wedding album design with Photoshop or something to that effect, it covers a lot of this, working with gradients and layer styles and some of the finer points of Photoshop in general. But to get started with, you should have some basic knowledge now with some of the different options you have. And then, do you have any other questions for me?
No, I think that's good good to get started. And
Now you just need to dive in and try it out yourself.
yeah, that's what I'm going to try to do.
And hopefully seeing some of the things that you saw tonight, even if you go back and review some of those tutorials that we have on the website, they're all specific to this version. We updated those probably a week and a half or so ago. But hopefully it'll click a little better for you. So when you're watching the tutorial, it's like, oh yeah, I remember when he showed me that. So maybe it'll make more sense now that you seen it in person. But anyhow, that and every tool here has its own separate little video clip. So every tool has like a little 5-10 minute video on all the options on how these tools work. So it won't take a lot of time to review. Like this insert photo tool, it's about 10 minutes. Shows you every option there is available for the insert photo tool. So you can review those, and once you get into it, if you have questions like, geez, I really want to do this, but I don't quite know how, you can give me a call back. But that hopefully at least get you going.
Well, I sure appreciate it.
All right. Well, don't be afraid to give us a call back if you still have questions.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right.
Appreciate it
Yep.
very much.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.